Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, we're going to talk about some transfer business, some things that are happening on that front. Some of the names that we've talked about before: Tosin, Olise, center backs, Portugal, a lot more of that. And then we're going to talk about as well kind of the manager role and some of the news and things that have gone on and been reported in recent days, about Southgate and all of that, that I would like to discuss and perhaps clarify a bit on why those names are coming up and why people are thinking that way. And then a few other transfer bits and all of that as well. So we will get right into that. And once again, we have a new intro by our friend Jevin in the Discord. As usual, on point from Jevin with the creation there. Got a little seat went a little high here. All right, so yeah, let's get into it. First and foremost, talking about center backs. Previously, we'd obviously discussed a number of different ones, and some of that news kind of coming forward. There's been a lot of talk of Tosin, and I mentioned before that it was becoming maybe more of an option viewed from the United side as an opportunity for United. And we've seen some of that news kind of come out in the last week or so. I think there was a good report from Rob Dawson that he was definitely being viewed as a potential option in the last couple of days. And that was my understanding when I started talking about it a bit more, is that aside from the opportunity being out there, it was becoming potentially more of an option for United. The trickiest part, I think, for United and Tosin is if they can offer a role that would be suitable. United are going to be looking at multiple center backs. Obviously, I think right now the three main names I would consider are Todibo, Branthwaite, and Tosin. But then you also have other names too, like Bremer and Silva, who we'll talk about in a minute. Ignacio. There's a lot of names, but those are three that I would essentially consider at least at first. And it's really likely they're going to buy at least two, because Varane will leave and likely one of Maguire or Lindelof leaves. And so you need to replace them, and you're going to need to bring in at least two center backs to not be in this situation. So, with Branthwaite, kind of the strategy is to, you look at this situation with Everton, their financial situation doesn't get better at all. Every week something worse comes out. Now it looks like their, potential takeover is falling apart, which is certainly not helpful with the loans, with the things that they have, and all of that. And so given that kind of situation, the kind of strategy with Branthwaite will be to see, you can kind of hold their feet to the fire until they are in a position where they need to sell them at a better cost, because United are not going to pay anywhere near 80 million or anything like some of the numbers that have flown around for Gerard Branthwaite. They just won't. It's not going to happen. They're not going to be paying, those kind of prices for that kind of player, who is a lot of potential but is not the finished article as of yet. So that's what they're going to be doing there. Todibo is a more known quantity, 40 million or so on cost. Tosin, a free agent. So it's kind of all about allocation of budgets and options in all of that. So yeah, I do think that Tosin is becoming an option. I do think that, they are definitely wary of needing to spend more money in other positions as well. And they can't be going and spending the full 100 million on center backs, because if they do that, then it makes it a lot more difficult to replace in other areas. But Yeah, I do think that it's becoming obviously clear that there's going to be at least probably 2 center backs brought in, and Tosin becoming more of an option from United side. Branthwaite, they want to kind of push the pressure on Everton, and and then I would really still strongly consider Todibo. There's still a lot of talk of Bremer. I find it a little difficult to believe for a few reasons, but I'm not saying it's not. I just do for some reason. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on there. And that will be a focus. So as we get closer to like June 30th, end of the fiscal year, we'll see a bit more on Branthwaite. I think that one, it's going to be pressure on Everton up until then. With Tosin, you can't agree a contract with a free agent in England until the summer, and so they can't be agreeing a deal with him or anything. Now, I'm not saying they have or started talks, but they couldn't anyway. So that'll be more in the June, July area regardless as well. So big focus there, and certainly this is an area where I would be certain that that United will make signings. Then I want to talk about Olise, because you've obviously been getting more confirmations from Fabrizio Romano, from otherwise, that United are in fact interested in Michael Olise, as I've been saying for probably 6 months now. And it's very likely he's going to be the top choice in that, if they pursue a right-sided winger. Now, part of that is, of course, you look at the situations of Mason Greenwood and Jadon Sancho. Right now, as I've said many, many times, you have Marcus Rashford, Rasmus Højlund, and Alejandro Garnacho. And none of them are naturally right-sided players. Their other options are Antony, Greenwood, Sancho, and Ahmad. Well, I don't see Ahmad getting enough chances to prove that he's going to be somebody that they'll figure into the starting or into the competing for a starting spot next year. Sancho is very likely still to leave. That's what I've maintained all along. Regardless of Ten Hag, he has other issues with the club, other issues with the situation. Is very likely to leave. Now, the success that he's having at Dortmund, that Dortmund are having, is just only a positive. It's only a good thing. If they win the Champions League, I mean, even by making it there, but if they win the Champions League, they get more money, they get this. I think it becomes possible for a deal. Now, I think it's kind of ridiculous to consider that United should take only 25-30 million, because let's say you sell Sancho and you sell Greenwood. Well, it gives you a lot of financial flexibility, no doubt about that. You'd have to replace, because right now we're already slim on the wings, which is why, Garnacho had to start, 40 plus games in a row or something like that, right? And Rashford was starting pretty much every game as well. That's not enough. Antony isn't good enough, and if they could shift him, they would. The problem is interest, is if there's any interest in him. So even signing Olise, you're saying, all right, maybe we've got 4 good forwards right now. We need at least 1 or 2 more. It would be tough, to get another one in. But I think that it's very likely Sancho is sold, but they do need to get a realistic fee, not 20-25 million from Dortmund. I think Dortmund will offer more than that, maybe 30-35, but maybe another loan that has good costs built into it, plus an obligation at the end for 30-35, so that in total it's 40-45 million with wages covered, but it's spread over a year. That might be a more feasible route that's more realistic. So we will see. Obviously I'm curious to see if Wilcox has a discussion with Sancho after the season ends and anything changes there. But at the moment, I would certainly still expect Sancho to go, Greenwood to be sold, Ahmad probably to be sold, and then Olise brought in, because we need more wingers, and we need a naturally right-sided, left-footed winger who's actually good. We don't have one. In terms of Portugal, there's a lot of talk. João Neves, Silva, other players, things like that. There's Hillman, who I think is still a very valid option. The problem with, I think, Neves and Silva is you look at the prices and they're quoting 100 million for these players, and it's just not it's not realistic for United to be paying that. If Benfica were to make, Antonio Silva available for 50 million, I think that United would be in that discussion to bring him in, because he's very admired at United. So definitely think that would be possible. But if they're not bringing the price down there, then it's just not realistic. And the same with João Neves. It's not going to happen for 100 million. There's definite debate over whether he's the right fit into the midfield as well. But you got to talk about realistic fees for these players. And I think Holman could be had for a more realistic fee and is a better fit in terms of, coming into the midfield, kind of defensive midfield role. So it's tricky though, because there's always a lot of interest from United in Portugal, a lot of players scouted, a lot of people watched, and in recent years we haven't really followed up on any of that. And I'm quite curious to see if we do moving forward, under new hierarchy, new director, football, all of that, actually pursue some of these, Portuguese players, Portuguese league talents or not. But those are names I would keep an eye on. You have Silva and Inácio for either side on the center back. You have Holman and Neves as potential different midfield options, and those are the main ones I would keep an eye on at the moment. But whether they pursue them or not remains to be seen, and actually try to get a deal done. But I think of all of them, Holman is probably the more realistic one. I want to talk about Joselu because it was some months ago I'd heard a small kind of rumor like United had checked in on, potentially signing someone like Joselu, and looking at a situation at Madrid. Obviously scored the 2 goals last night to bring Madrid to the Champions League final after they were down 1-0. United need another striker, but the type of striker and the costs associated, I think, are certainly a factor. You paid a lot of money for Rasmus Højlund. You want him to continue to develop. Realistically, I've always maintained that for me, bringing in a winger like Olise, having the flexibility on the wings and the different profiles and all of that would be great. At striker, I don't see how it works to bring in another expensive young striker who's going to want minutes when you're trying to develop Rasmus Højlund. I think it makes more sense to bring in a Cavani, an older player to come in and mentor them. And Joselu could be that guy. United had checked in on him months ago. There was a report last week from a decent journalist in Spain. It was Moretti, right? Mateo. That they were interested in his situation. And, with Madrid obviously getting Mbappe this summer and all of that, I think it is likely he probably leaves after this summer, after this year. And if he does, I wouldn't rule it out from, United being an option for him. So that is, it's an interesting name. It's not like, again, it's not like this super exciting name, but look, it's a player who scored 2 goals in the Champions League. And I think it's the right idea. I would rather see us bring in somebody who's a good mentor, who's consistent, who's solid, who's experienced, who can help to lead kind of these players and teach them a bit, rather than spending a whole bunch of money on another striker that then we're having issues trying to figure out who's playing and when. Someone can come in and play 15, 20 games maybe would be good. So I really like the idea of that, and I hope that develops and that, and so I made kind of a hilarious. I made a joke yesterday though on Twitter about it being our next striker, but I meant it to some degree that potentially an actual option, not the only one, but potentially an actual option this summer as an older, experienced veteran striker, and I personally think that makes more sense than getting another winger where you have one striker position and you have Rasmus Højlund. You've got 2 winger positions and you only have 2 players. And they need more rotation, and neither of them are naturally right-sided player. So it makes more sense to me to spend some money there and balance the team out and bring in an older player to back up Rasmus Højlund. It just makes more sense to me to do that. So that's my view. I think they're checking on that potential as that type of player as well as a real possibility for the summer. Lastly, on the manager role and a couple other little pieces of news, there was obviously reports of, Southgate, and then there was reports of Tuchel, and there's reports of this, and there's reports of that. My honest take on it is I think most people are somewhat guessing on, or stretching, maybe not guessing, but stretching on to try to get the big kind of scoop on the manager side of it, where they're saying, yeah, there's been contacts between Tuchel and INEOS, or Tuchel's representatives and INEOS. And so he makes sense, and he's this and he's that, so we're going to push it like he's the favorite and it's happening. I don't think he is the favorite, and that means it's happening. I don't think that it's correct to say that necessarily. And then you've got, the other side of like Southgate. And it was like, well, Southgate could see himself in that role, could be in that role and could be a boost for Southgate and all that. And to be fair, if you read the context of the article, it kind of explains it. But the point is this, and I've said this probably since October of last year, what INEOS are looking for is their view of the manager is, this is what I wrote, that the next long-term manager for United, whether it's Ten Hag or otherwise, it's not about how many trophies they've won and looking for the next, for Pep, because that person's not available. But based on who's going to be an effective communicator, because they feel that communication breakdown has been a huge part of the struggles that United have had between coach and players and staff and all of that. And a solid coach to build and put in foundations on this basis of playing style or game model, as it's been reported and all of that. That's what they're focused on. That's what they want. Who's going to communicate with the squad effectively? Who's going to build a proper kind of better atmosphere that's not so fractured and disjointed? And who's going to be a good coach on the ground to teach them the basics and align a style that goes with the game model, the way that they want to play? That's the qualifications. So one could take that and say, well, they know Southgate and they have checked in on Southgate. I've said before, you'd be surprised by the number of people that they've spoken with in terms of manager names. I mean, the list is massive, and I understand there's this thing saying they're not in talks with any managers and all of that. I'm talking about way back when, and through that time, they've have third-party people and such who've talked to agents, who've explored things, who've looked into things, and a lot of it just exploratory way before in terms of contingency plans. But you'd be surprised at all the people that they've spoken with, and many of them not real manager targets at all. So one could stretch it and say, well, yeah, if Ten Hag is sacked, then Southgate kind of fits that. He did improve the culture in the English camp from this kind of fractured base that it was before. He communicates well with players. He's very well liked by them, by most of them. But that's just a stretch. That's just, to me, it's just tying it together, right? It doesn't mean he's been offered the job and he's lining it up. It doesn't mean that. And that definition could stretch to a number of people. The questions with Thomas Tuchel are, does he actually fit with that? Can he align with a structure properly and have the patience that's necessary to move forward? And that's the same question of Ten Hag that I said a long time ago. Would he be willing to really fit within this role and structure, be patient, and do what is asked of him as not, the head honcho, but more of a coach? And those are questions. And for a long time, as I've maintained, the next manager of United, be it Ten Hag or otherwise, and I say next because even if it's Ten Hag, it's like a new era, is not really so much based on a wins or results or this or that, but do they align with their definition of coach? Do they align with their definition of the manager? That's the most important thing for INEOS. That's the most important thing because they see what they see. So, yeah. And you can see the way that they operate through the business. It's not enough to be good. It's not enough to be in the position. We want someone who fits exactly what we want in these positions. CEO, CFO, director of football, all of it. They want someone who fits exactly that and to clearly define those roles. Moving Darren Fletcher from technical director because they want him to do what is exactly his job rather than be the technical director, and it's not their definition of a technical director. So they have a very explicit way of viewing things, you know, and you've kind of seen a lot of the stuff about staffing and things, and I've kind of made it clear that my feeling was that, you know, for sure, some of the things that were being said to staff, the writing's on the wall about, you know, cutting and downsizing and things like that to reduce administrative costs. And I'm saying you can see the way that they will operate all the way down. You know, you've got to fit into the way that they want to do things, or they'll tell you to leave. And that's just how they run their businesses. And this is one of them. So that's the biggest question there. You know, when you look at as well, you know, there's some reports today about a fresh reopening into the issues with injuries and all of that. And yeah, I know that is also correct. And as I kind of said before, their view is going to be the managers not, you know, they want fitness regimens and all of this and all of that set by other people, experts in each of these areas, training schedules, everything, where it's not the manager saying we train on these days and these hours and we do this and we do that. They want it really segmented. And so it's about who fits into that. And some people do and some people don't. And that's going to be, I think Ten Hag and Tuchel both face questions about how they fit into that and if they do fit into that. And I think that that's why some could lean and stretch it to coaches about, you know, other names and things that they see do fit into that. And so there's just a lot of that kind of going around. But I would just tell everybody just wait a little bit. But hopefully it provides a little bit of clarity on the manager role. It's just it's a subject I like to talk about because I think it's worth understanding, you know, that it's changing and you know, that it's just different. It's just different than it has been, and I think it's a good thing. You know, experts for each more segmented job, in clearly defined roles, is definitely the way forward for United. Okay. That's what I have for today. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I will see you in the next one.